Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Effective Resume Thursday. It is June 16th, 2022. We're very glad you're with us this afternoon. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. You're also welcome to go ahead and, if you want to, put your personal contact information in the chat window so you can network with other people who are on the call today. You're welcome to do that. For those on Zoom, just if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just enter your questions in the chat box. For those watching on Facebook, thank you for joining us. You can enter your questions in the comment field. We are monitoring both, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. I think I've met most of you. I've seen most of your names in the past. I'll just sort of pop everything up here and let you see. Here's what's going on, or here's what I've done. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can check my LinkedIn profile. So you're welcome to find anything out about me or reach out to me, and I'm glad to have a conversation with you. All right, well, our speaker today is Locke Alderson. He's a career consultant. He's been in this career business for at least 35, 40 years. I don't know. I'll let him tell you the exact number of years. You know, you never reveal somebody's age, so he only looks 29. So today he's going to talk about what recruiters look for in resumes. So Locke, thank you for being with us, and it's all yours.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Again, Jeff just switched gears a little bit on me. Because he have to get this over to full screen, okay? Because he asked me to speak on effective resumes. So he switched the topic, what recruiters look for in resumes. If you want that, go to my LinkedIn profile and look down at the enclosures and there, and that particular presentation is there. So just to get that cleared up in a hurry, Jeff, because of that.
Okay.
But I have switched it around. The presentation is largely the same. We'll go from there. So, but thanks for having me. Again, the presentation is called Effective Resumes. And what does it take to have an effective resume? What we're going to talk about. I want to thank Jeff for inviting me today. Yes, I do have over 42 years in industry and recruiting and have my own recruiting firm. And I've also parallel for that for about 10 years. I was in a volunteer working with those in job and career transition. Then in 2013, Mullen International, an outplacement firm out of New York, won the contract from Right Management to handle the Chase, JP Morgan Chase outplacement efforts. And so they hired 60 of us not worldwide, nationwide, to handle that volume of about 20,000 people that were being let go, and was with that for 4 years before Mullen sold out to Lee Heck Harrison because the contract was renegotiated. So that's kind of my background. I've been a job hunter at least 6 times when different jobs have ended or layoffs. I did get fired one time in there, which I won't include. And I won't include the times between contracts. When a contract came to an end, I had to search for another one. So that's kind of my background as both a recruiter, a career consultant, and as a job hunter. So that's what we want to talk about today, and talk about effective resumes. In an ideal world, you wouldn't need a resume. But most of us live in the real world for today. So that's kind of the frustration that we have of using a resume to get attracted. Again, effective resumes. What is an effective resume? Well, I'd say the most apt description is one that achieves your objective, whether it's to land a job or simply to get the interview. So that's what an effective resume is. And there's as many opinions about resumes as there are people. If you handed your resume to 10 people, you probably got 15 or 20 different comments about your resume. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. But what does it have? What does it have to be, or what does it take to have an effective resume? Well, one, you got to try and avoid the resume black hole. And we'll talk a little bit about that. You got to get through the applicant tracking system. And what's that all about? Get your resume in the hands of a recruiter and the hiring manager. Again, simply not just going through the applicant tracking system, but really getting your resume into the hands of the recruiter or the hiring manager and to land the interview. So that's what an effective resume does. Again, some assumptions about writers of resumes. One, they overestimate the power that the resume might have. Again, by saying that, it can't tell everything about you. You can't do that in 1 or 2 pages, much less 8 or 10 pages, all your accomplishments. And that most people assume the resumes actually get read. Actually, 75 to 80% of them go through an applicant tracking system and get weeded out. So the computer makes a decision and you get eliminated. But you may not even know about that. People underestimate the number of resumes received for a given job posting. I know when Gail Houston, who was at that time with EDS, mentioned she'd posted a job for a project manager, she got 300 responses in the first hour before she closed down the posting. So right now in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there are about 35,000 people with project manager, project of some kind in their profile. That's something to keep in. People overestimate the qualifications of people reading the resume. The average age of someone reading a resume is probably a high school graduate with 2 or 3 years of experience. Hate to tell you that, but that's who looks at the people that actually look at resumes after it goes through the applicant tracking system. Sometimes recruiters and sometimes hiring managers. Okay. They have the wrong content. Some people, it used to be that you could go to Kinko's, I'm showing my age, or FedEx office and make a copy of a resume and send out 50 of that. That won't work anymore because it doesn't have the right content. It doesn't match up to the requirements of the job. They assume the reader will understand the content. Again, your content has to be content that can be understood by a high school graduate. Okay, that's not to say that you haven't done some things more technical than that, but they have to be able to be understood. If I were to ask your significant other, what do you do and what they are? I know Dennis O'Hagan, when he was around, used to tell his wife, when he was at cocktail parties, his wife would be asked, what does he do? And he's in sales at IBM. Well, that's a description, but actually he was in charge of about 1/3 of a given product line worldwide. So it's a big difference of who you are. Don't understand the content. I think one size resume, as I mentioned, the cookie cutter resume doesn't apply anymore. And likewise, that more is better or less is better. Again, some people have said, cut it down to 1 page. Well, if you've got more experience in a couple of years, 1 page isn't going to do you justice. And again, if you've got as much experience as I have, 2 pages may not do you justice. So that's something that you have to recognize. Readers, these are some assumptions about resumes as you write your resume. And as I mentioned, if you give your resume to 100 different people, you might get as many as 100 different opinions. What makes a great resume? Well, it's organized and easy to read. It's easily understood. It's concise, usually about 2 pages, although sometimes 3 or 4. Certain career fields like education at the college level, like academia, often require 8 to 10 page resumes because they include all of the publications as an individual might have had. If you've got older experience like I do, again, I mentioned 42 years on my bio on the front. Again, you might want to summarize the older experience, 10, 15, 20 years, wherever there's a natural breaking place there, and summarize that into a section called prior professional experience. Just list the company name, your job title, and if there was any particular accomplishment that you had that you might want to list, you can put that. Don't include dates for that section, okay? And likewise, your resume needs to speak directly to the requirements of the job posting. And we'll take a look at that. There's a technique that I've got for dissecting the job posting that'll help you to do that. Well, what is a resume really? Some insider sequence? Really, it's a piece of advertising designed to get you an interview. Used to be that you'd get credit card applications in the mail and probably 9 times out of 10 or 99 out of 100 go into the trash. I'd occasionally pull one aside because it had an attractive offer attached to it. You know, so many free miles if you signed up. I know I signed up and got a computer or signed up for a credit card on Amazon. I got a new tablet computer because it gave a $100 discount on that tablet computer, which made it worthwhile, as well as a 5% cash back on my purchases on that Amazon card. So there are some things that will get your attention. Resumes are like that. You want somebody to pick up the phone and call you or to send you an email. Likewise, it's a script for the interview. I don't know whether you've ever been in a live interview situation where the manager looks at your resume and says, let me take another look at your resume, and looks at the first page and goes on to the second and then back to the first page. That first page, again, is going to get double exposure because it's the first thing that they've seen and the last thing that they've seen before the interview gets started. Contact information must be on your resume. Don't put it in a header. Headers are often not scanned by applicant tracking software. They're treated as null fields, meaning there's nothing there. So it's frustrating for the recruiter to have a perfect resume and have no way to contact you. Likewise, you might be frustrated because you aren't hearing from anybody, but have that contact information there and double check the phone numbers. I know in particular, I have a tendency to transpose numbers when I'm typing on the computer. It has to be easy to read and be understandable and be scannable. Go through an applicant tracking software. It used to be a scanner, but now it's applicant tracking software. Don't use a template, because often templates, when you submit a resume that's in template format, it may not be transposed into the applicant tracking system as you have created it. Don't use text boxes. Again, some of the applicant tracking software doesn't recognize text boxes or fancy fonts. The fonts I recommend are some easy ones: Arial, Calibri, Cambria, Times Roman, or Tahoma are some good type fonts to use. You need to have a headline. What's the title of the job that you're applying for? Because if it doesn't match the job that you're applying for, it may get screened out by that applicant tracking software. That's the simplest screening process. They're looking for exact matches on your headline with the job title of that particular opening. It needs a summary, which is a brief summary, a brief overview of your career, usually 4 to 8 lines, I'll say 6, relating your duties, your areas of expertise, and what you've done, followed by a couple of bulleted achievements or accomplishments that tell how well you performed those duties. And those bulleted accomplishments in the headline may change with each resume you send out. If that's all you do to customize or tailor your resume to the application, that may be sufficient to get you considered. It also needs to say who you've worked for and what do they do. I know at one point in my career, I came back to Texas. I'd gone to high school here, went to California, came back to Texas in '76 to work for a company called Mostec. At that time, they were the world's leading producer of random access semiconductor memories. They went out of business in '83. So if younger recruiters may not recognize the company name Mostec, may not recognize it at all. So you need to tell them properly in a one-line tag sentence what they do. Use keywords from the job posting. You can use it in your summary and in your duties. But again, if your experience doesn't reflect keywords that are listed on the job posting, you may again get eliminated. And proofread it. Again, check the spelling and the grammar, particularly if you were a manager. There's a word called manger. Again, if you leave out the letter in manager, you'll come up with the word manger, which is done on occasion, which is kind of humorous at times. I mentioned this little thing, the black hole. If you've ever sent a resume in and been ghosted or never heard from them, you've entered the resume black hole. And where did that occur? How does that occur? Well, with the internet, it was possible to send out multiple resumes in a single day, maybe as many as 50 or 100, as opposed to folding a resume, putting it in an envelope, addressing the envelope, stamping it, and taking it to the mailbox to send out a resume where you might get 5 or 10 a day. So what companies did was to take all that volume of resumes to take a look at and put in software, applicant tracking software, to weed through all that. 95% of the Fortune 100 company or Fortune 1000 companies have some type of applicant tracking software. Actually, there are about 100 different products out there for applicant tracking software, and they run from bare bones all the way up through the Cadillac, which is Taleo. I know I helped to design the implementation of the Taleo system when I was with Siebel Corporation, so it's been around a while. But that's the problem that you're trying to get through, get your resume recognized. But what really happens when you submit a resume? Again, odds are you'll never know what happened. Again, there may be no feedback whatsoever. There are too many unqualified candidates, and we want to talk about that. The best example I can think of that I gave to a candidate this morning, when I moved from Siebel over to Oracle, when Oracle purchased Siebel, they still supported the Siebel product. And I was looking for a Siebel consultant in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had about 75 responses to the job posting. 50 of them did not even contain the word Siebel. They were automatically in the reject pile. I know statistically there were candidates in that 50 that could have done an excellent job, but I was looking for a Siebel candidate. So of the 25 that remained, I would sort through the resumes. If they had Siebel once, they were probably a user of the customer relationship software, which was Siebel's product at the time. If they had it 10 times, they may have installed it, which is what I was actually looking for. Resumes get fed into an applicant tracking system and are reformatted. Yes, that's true. The technical phrase is that they are parsed and put into a format. Think about your information. If you ever filled out an information, say at the doctor's office, it asks for your information in their format, not your format. It's in a resume. So you need to be aware of that. You need keywords from the job posting. The best matches are selected for further screening. Your credentials, your education and experience get reviewed actually by a recruiter, and then your resume is actually scanned for your contributions. And the top matches are generally phone interviewed today as opposed to face-to-face interviews. Well, let's take a look at some actual statistics. These were gathered by a professor at Cal State San Francisco, who's a noted authority on resumes. You have a good resume and it's not getting any results. Well, why not? For everybody that says there are 200 people who look at a job posting and say that's interested, maybe 100 actually submit a resume. 75 of those get eliminated by the applicant tracking software. Of the remaining 25 that actually get reviewed by a real person, a real set of eyes to take a look at it. Again, they may narrow it down to 5 to 10 that actually get a phone interview. 3 to 5 may come through with a face-to-face or Skype interview today. And again, maybe one gets an offer. I know my statistics were about 85% acceptance when they got down to the offer stage. So those are just some things to think about. A lot of statistics on resumes. Yes, the odds seem to be stacked against you, but don't let that throw you. Again, what you're looking to do is to create a resume that gets attention and creates interviews or generates interviews. First step, the headline, the job title that you're applying for. Again, if you don't, it's probably going to get eliminated. You need a summary of 4 to 8 lines that I mentioned, the overview of your career, your resume, plus 2 to 3 bulleted accomplishments. In short, what you're doing with the accomplishments and your summary is creating a value statement that says something like, this is what I've done for my employers. By implication, that's what I can do for you, Mr. Employer. It needs to have keywords and skills, visually appealing and easily read. You don't want to use an 8-point type font because it's too small. I can always increase the size of it on my computer, but when I print that out, it's still 8-point font and it's very difficult to read. Likewise, you don't want 24-point font because some of the applicant tracking software used to cut the 24-point font in half. It's always fun to try and figure out somebody's name from the bottom half of their name because it cut it down to 12-point font. Needs to have accomplishments, and it also needs to be proofread. Well, let's take a look at some resume basics now. Again, what's the big deal of real estate? Generally, two pages is enough to provide a summary for what you've done. And usually it's what have you done for me recently? There's some ways to get around that where if you have earlier experience in your career that you want to highlight, there are ways to do that as well. And we'll talk about that when we talk about hybrid resumes. The format that you can choose in terms of type font. Here are the actual fonts for Arial, Tahoma, Calibri, Times Roman. Okay, you can see what they are, the difference in size. Times Roman as a 10-point is a little smaller than Arial at a 10-point. You generally want 1-inch margins on the top and bottom, on the left and right, and limit your use of bold, italics, and underlines. Use those for emphasis, if you will. Okay, you want a resume that's scannable through the applicant tracking system, through a job board, and they used applicant tracking software as well, and emails. Don't use text boxes, borders, or templates. They can cause problems for the computer. It may not look like what you created and sent to them. This is a resume in Wingding that I copied. Actually, it's a 7-page resume. If you go to the type fonts on the top of a Word document, there's a way to do that. Wingding is one of those toward the bottom. I could have translated this by highlighting it with a Control-A and then hitting Wingding or one of the other type fonts, but I saved it because it was an interesting type resume. Before, when I was with Oracle Corporation, before they upgraded my software from 7 to 10 on Word, I'd get a resume in 10, and this is what it would look like. I have to send it to my wife to translate it back before I figured out how to do a Control-A and use the fonts. But that's kind of an interesting highlight or sidelight from what resumes can look like. Okay. The contact information needs to be on there, including your zip code. Zip codes are the basis for determining how far away you live from where the job site is located. And again, you may get eliminated if you don't show up in somebody's search because they've used a 25-mile radius on their search. If you've seen most job boards, they have a default setting for 25 miles for the job. You can increase that to 50 or drop it down to 5 or 10 if you want. But again, if you don't put that, you may get eliminated from consideration because it didn't have that. And there are ways, if you live in some place like Denton and are open to working in Dallas or Fort Worth, which is a little further than 25 miles, you can list a zip code for Dallas like 75201, okay, which is a Dallas zip code. Even though it's a phony zip code, you live in Denton, it may get you considered for positions in Dallas. The line, as I mentioned, needs to have a laser focus. Summary is experience. You need to have the experience with concrete examples. That's where those bulleted accomplishments or bulleted achievements can occur, and I'll show you how to do that. If you have a technical background, a skills table may be critical to what you have. I know when I was recruiting IT people, I always like to see a skills table on the first page. It gave me a quick read on whether they had the necessary skills for the positions I was recruiting for. Again, a good format for the experience. I know a lot of recruiters look at it this way: the company name on the left, along with the location and with the dates out to the right. And adding a tagline about the company, that one-line summary that I mentioned. The job title and duties and responsibilities, usually 1 to 5 lines. You don't want to book there. I've seen resumes when I was recruiting IT consultants, and those resumes were often written for the consulting firms as opposed to or contract firms, as opposed to recruiters. Again, if it's too long, they talked about every project that they'd ever worked on. What were the technical qualifications for that? Again, that was necessary for those kind of jobs because often contract firms had to match line for line what the company was looking for as a recruiter. Duties and responsibilities versus achievements. Probably 90% of the resumes that I reviewed, and probably in my career, 40 plus years, I looked at over 1 million resumes. 90% of them simply talked about the duties and responsibilities somebody performed versus the accomplishment. What was the result of performing those duties? What was the impact? What was the significance? Because that's the selling point to sell. This is the value that I bring to your company. So an accomplishment is a bullet, usually with starting with an active verb and 1 to 2 lines examples. Some people call those star stories that you can start to tell a story from. Keywords more than once spell out that. I mentioned that Siebel example that I've been, if you use an acronym, I was with a candidate this morning and talking to her about her background. She has a background in financial planning and analysis. Well, FP&A, the acronym, is well known by recruiters. That's one of the few ones, but she has it spelled out in her resume and in her profile as well. So spell it out if you use it more than once. Education, certification, and awards. You want to include those. A lot of resumes, again, simply talk about when you got your degree. They don't talk about the continuing education or classes that you may have taken to keep your skills current. I know when I was doing the work where Chase candidates, they often had to take it. Know your candidate, know your applicant, I think it was, which is a money laundering situation. They were trying to look for people that made deposits over $10,000 and they automatically got flagged. If you've got references or a picture, you want to omit those. The only time when it's good to include a picture is when you're an actor or a model, and that's male and female in today's world. But again, if they have pictures like that, I know when I was with Oracle Corporation, we would automatically eliminate those kind of candidates. We didn't want to be accused of discrimination against those kind of candidates. So we automatically eliminate all resumes that have pictures on them. Spelling checkers, numbers and dates. Honesty. It's very important to be honest on your resume. Again, the reason being, if you're dishonest or exaggerate too much, again, you may face that you get eliminated for a job. There was a coach that was hired by Notre Dame, said he had his degree. He didn't, he got let go. He was then moved on to a Florida school where he brought them into top 10 ranking in terms of football. Again, tips for an effective resume. If you don't match the requirements, at least 75, 80%, don't apply. Likelihood is you'll get eliminated. You want to have a readable resume, scannable. I mentioned some of these times again and again because these are the important things about your resume. The honesty, the achievements. We'll talk about those. This sheet and any part of the presentation that you'd like, if you want it, just indicate that you saw the career DFW presentation, and I'll be happy to send you the slide deck. It's lockealderson@gmail.com. But again, the accomplishments, the situation, action taken, and results, STAR or STAR, again, are what you want to talk about. How do you come up with those? Maybe you have performance reviews or LinkedIn recommendations, or writing something like in the last 6 months, what have you done that you're proud of? I talked to this candidate this morning. She'd been in consulting for the last 10 years. She only has 2 years to describe that experience, but nothing about some of the projects that she'd worked on. Where possible, use dollars and percents to emphasize for emphasis to convey impact. You can do before and after comparisons. But the real significance is ask yourself about the achievement or accomplishment. So what? Does it tell a complete story? What was the significance of it? What was the impact? What resulted from this activity? Those kinds of questions will help you, because those are the things that convey impact when people look at your experience. Again, don't lie on your resume. Little white lies do carry forward, and you'll get caught. There's too much information about you on the internet. People go out and check your LinkedIn profile. If the LinkedIn profile and the resume aren't in sync, they don't have to agree 100%, but if they're out of sync, people may not ask why. They may just eliminate you for that. This is just a quick look at my resume. Again, this is a format. You notice my name at the top, Plano with my zip code, my email address, and my phone number. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. My touchpad is very sensitive. I touched it again, made the problem with that. Again, there's 4 lines, some highlights. Again, from my experience with that was with Mullen and Associates. About 70% of the candidates I worked with got jobs. The speaking engagements at Career Transition Workshop up at Frisco at Stonebriar Community Church and up in Frisco, there were about 19,000 candidates that heard the presentation. Gives us some idea. You notice the highlights on my experience at Lee Heck Harrison. That's another way to do it, that you can highlight things like that. Some other tips for effective resume. We're going to take a look at dissecting the job posting. What are the requirements? And preparing a table with the job requirements in the left column and how your experience matches that in the right column. It doesn't have to be 100% match for that. But again, what have you done that's similar to what's required? And then you can optimize your resume for each position that you apply for, matching the job title that you've applied for and 2 or 3 accomplishments. You can take those accomplishments from the right side, from your experience, and support that. And we'll show you how to do that. Here's an actual job posting for a position at DXC Technologies here in Richardson. Again, this is down narrow and dirty, quick and dirty, if you will, description of the company at the top and the requirements at the bottom. With that, we took a look at that. As I say, created a job table that looks like this. The company name in the first row and the requirements in the second row on the left column, and left it blank for the candidate to fill in his experience on the right column. And what it'll look like filled in, then he can take that experience, the title, and it'll look like this. Title from the job posting and 3 items, bulleted items right here that you can plug into the resume. By doing that, he's customized his resume to that requirement. That first third of a page, which is the scanning page, what's scanned typically at first, says that he matches some of those things. That's what the recruiter is actually looking for. And those kind of things. Makes it really easy for them. Maybe I should go further and look at this. You can also take that and use that job requirements table for a cover letter. Actual cover letters usually consist of 3 sections. The first section talks about where you found the job. The second section is the middle section, how you match the requirements of that particular job. And the third section, let's follow up and get together and talk about my background and your requirements. But you can use that, taking out the middle section and putting a job requirements table. Makes it easy for that reader of that to identify, okay, we're looking for A, B, and C, and he's got A, B, and C, or she's got A, B, and C. Maybe I should look further at the resume. Or simply you can take it and simply put how your qualifications match up, okay? But that makes it real easy for the recruiter, the hiring manager, or that clerk in HR personnel to take a look and see what your accomplishments were. Short, You can tell stories from all of those kinds of things. This is another job. This one actually, I should probably take this slide out. This is actually my background for a recruiting type position, as you can see. The industries that I'd worked in, the relationships that I'd built, those were some of the questions in the job posting. Some other things that you need to do. Use the keywords that are in the job posting. That's the number one reason that applicant tracking systems reject candidates. Include your accomplishments, the results of performing your duties. They're quantifiable. They could be identified. They add credibility to your experience. Focus on getting your resume into the hands of the recruiter or the hiring manager. Alternative channels. Don't just apply online. Use a snail mail, okay, to the company name. Look up in LinkedIn, see if you can identify the hiring manager or the recruiter by their function or by their recruiter's title, what they do. Okay, or use FedEx envelope. That's another way to do it. Registers are certified mail. Somebody has to sign for them. I've heard of somebody using a FedEx box. It used to be the Postal Service parcel post. Somebody would have to sign for those. They'd open up a box and here's a resume and tissue paper. Kind of gimmicky, but again, it got open and got noticed and got read. Have someone in your network pass along your resume. You want to become an employee referral. Why? Because employee referrals, frequently the employee gets a reward or a bonus if you get hired. Also, that employee passing along your resume is going to have to receive an answer from the recruiter why or why not you were considered for the position. I know when I was with Siebel Corporation, we used to get resumes from Tom Siebel's office and have to look at the resumes. They had to get a little bit stronger consideration. We didn't have to hire anybody. We didn't necessarily have to interview anybody. But again, we had to be able to provide some feedback that that resume had actually been reviewed as opposed to pass through. I mentioned the different delivery channels. Again, what are some of the things that you need to think about? If your relevant experience or education are hard to find at a glance or hard to read, you're probably going to get eliminated. Okay. It's not immediately clear. If it's not immediately clear what experience that you're applying for, again, elimination factor. And if it's not customized, like I mentioned, even if a simple customization of adding the title of the job and a couple of accomplishments that line up with some of the requirements of the job, again, you may get eliminated from consideration. I like to include this one because sometimes as a recruiter, I've been asked by the hiring manager for not just 10 candidates with 10 qualifications that match, but 12 or 13, asking for things that weren't in the job posting. Again, when that happened, I often would go to the hiring manager and said, you know, haven't found too many candidates like the purple squirrel. I'll keep looking for one for you. In the meantime, I've identified a couple of candidates that meet many of the qualifications you've listed. Frequently, they would look at those and interview some of those and hire some of those. But that candidate, the purple squirrel, what they're looking for is the candidate with the ideal experience, the ideal education, and work for peanuts. Again, taking a look at resumes now. This is actually a resume. You notice on this one, got a good title, got a 3-line summary, if you will, got some areas of expertise. He's got his professional experience with Coca-Cola. Again, even though Coca-Cola is well known, this is the bottling company, not the syrup company out of Atlanta. He's got his job title and his experience. He's also got 3 bulleted items about his experience there and bulleted items below. Well, that's one way to do a resume. This is a sample again. Here's another one. I don't like this particular resume. This was the candidate from JP Morgan Chase. Again, the thing about this resume that I don't like, and I've seen a number of candidates that have resumes with a number of bullets. In 6 to 10 seconds, which bullets are you asking me to pay attention to? Nothing wrong with the resume. And as I say, it's condensed to get it onto one slide. But again, what am I being asked to pay attention to in 6 to 10 seconds? One of the things I suggested to candidates with this type of resume is a slightly different format, breaking up the experience, dividing the experience on top with the accomplishments below. It makes it easier to read. It breaks it up. Again, having to look at so many bullets at one time. This is a resume of a teacher in Louisville, Kentucky. Again, I happen to spend my grade school years in Louisville, Kentucky, and Belknap Elementary was my grade school. So I've tailored her resume or doctored her resume to reflect that. But again, she was looking to get out of teaching. This was a resume, and again, it's crowded because it wants to get onto one page. Again, it violates that spacing that I mentioned to you, so it's easily read. But in her case, we went to a hybrid resume, which takes her experience and divides it up into her areas of expertise. It changes the title from teacher to she's looking for a position in customer relations, communications, or PR. And it breaks out her experience into areas of functional expertise, whether communication skills or administration or sales. And down below it has her employment history. Recruiters tend not to like functional type resumes simply because they tell what you've done and maybe your accomplishments, but they fail to tell when you've done it or who you did it for. There's a way around that. This is my functional resume. That's actually a hybrid resume. Again, the title is the job that I'm applying for. This company was looking for education up front. They wanted an MBA from a top business school in the United States, and Cal Berkeley is one of those on some people's lists. Again, I have 5 sections of expertise here. You only see 2 of them here, but I can rearrange those so that they agree, management and recruiting match up with a headline. There are 3 others on my actual resume, but I actually have at the bottom of the resume my actual experience and the dates and what I've done. But these are the accomplishments that I had as a manager and administrator, and these are my recruiter accomplishments, if you will. So that's a way to get around that, to bring in that prior experience. If they would have been looking for somebody with affirmative action experience, I've got that experience. The fact that I did it 50 years ago, a little bit different, but again, it could be on the resume, so at least you get a look from somebody's recruiter. Some final tips to take a look at. If you don't meet 75, 85% of the requirements, don't apply. They won't get considered. If you have the idea that, well, a recruiter is going to stick me in the database and I'll get considered for other positions in the company because they've got more than the one opening the recruiters are working for. The recruiter's attitude is, if I don't fill my positions, I'm going to probably be out there looking like you are. On a scannable resume, don't put your contact information in the header. And do proofread it, have a headline, use a summary, dissect the job posting. Once you've done it a couple of times, it becomes easier to do. The first time may take 10, 15 minutes, but after that, it's a lot easier. You've got that experience in blocks that you can simply plug into a new job requirements table. Use the job requirements table during a phone interview. Again, you typically ask, have the resume, the job posting, and the job requirements table. And those statements that you have there are usually 2 lines, give you the basis to start a story, to answer their questions. Try using different delivery channels and also include keywords. For do's and don'ts, makes it real simple for that. You can see what those are. That's kind of the presentation. If you're interested in the presentation, it's lockealderson@gmail.com. And Jeff, I think that wraps us up. For that, we'll take questions about resumes.
Locke, thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic and ask away. Questions. I know it was a lot of information. Any questions? David?
Hey, Locke.
I do. Oh,
Go for it. Go first.
are you sure? Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'm working right now. I'm anticipating being laid off because it's the mortgage industry. So I have to go to the other room real quick. My question is about the cover letter and using the tables. Aren't cover letters often scanned by the ATS systems, and wouldn't the table kind of mess it up? And the other thing is, do you recommend putting the cover letter in with a resume when you apply for a job?
First thing about cover letters that I failed to mention is probably 75 to 80% of them don't get read. And that's because that middle section that I mentioned, telling how you qualify and match up the qualifications is often too long. Had a candidate with a networking group that I'm in. The candidate's background was in corporate communications. The middle section was 5 paragraphs. And you think, uh-oh, too long, won't be read. And that's true. Okay. The other way to get around that by using just the qualifications, that second slide about cover letters that I mentioned, is a way to do that. You can include that cover letter as the first page in your actual resume document or the last page. That's another way to get around it. Again, that's something that you can think about as you're involved in that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think let me add a little bit about cover letters. You're right. Most people, most recruiters don't read them, but there's a very good chance that when the hiring manager gets it, they're going to take more time to look at a resume. And if there's a cover letter attached, there's a good chance that hiring managers will read a cover letter.
Again, that's having the bulleted type summary that's there. It's talking about your accomplishments. Think about when you get your email in the morning. Most of us take a look at the subject line and the sender line and make a decision. 95% of those emails get eliminated because we aren't interested. Again, the same kind of thing with cover letters. They tend to be, if I have to wade through it to try and understand what you're talking about, I may eliminate, may not look further. But if I've got something that points out in bullet format, again, don't want to use too many, but again, it will help you get identified with the job and what your qualifications and how you match up on that. That answer your question about cover letters?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Chris. Somebody
David.
else had a question. Was it Brandon?
David.
David
This is
Webb.
Yeah, David Webb, not Jason Bourne, but David Webb. Quick question about fonts. I know you mentioned 5 or 6 different fonts that were, acceptable. In all your years, is there a particular font that you like better than another?
I like Arial personally, but that's a personal bias that I have. Calibri is another good one. Times Roman tends to be at a 10-point font, tends to be a little smaller than the other two. Notice the sample that I showed, that's why I showed the size of the different fonts at 10, 11, and 12-point fonts.
Perfect.
I think if you saw the couple examples that Locke had, one of them was a New Times Roman, and because of the little serifs, I think it makes it more difficult to read. You just want a resume that's clean and easy, so that you don't want the recruiter to think about what the font looks like. You just want them to go, oh yeah, it's got the information I'm looking for, and they go on. So whatever you can do to make it the least distractive, the easiest to read, ample white space so that it's not cluttered, because people are not going to read a novel. They're going to scan it. And so whatever you can do to make it easiest to scan, I think succeeds.
Brandon, you have a question.
Hi, Locke. Thank you for your information today. It's been very helpful. You had mentioned that if you have several years worth of experience, that you can add a prior professional experience section.
Right.
When you do that, is there a certain time, like, if it's older than 10 years old, you want to include it into that section, or, 20 years back?
As I mentioned, there may be a natural break somewhere between 10 and 20 years, okay, where you've changed jobs, you've been promoted, okay. For people that have worked at one company, maybe 25, I've got a friend that I meet with on Wednesday mornings for coffee. He was 27 years at TI, but he changed jobs a couple of times in there. He got promoted where he was a manager or a supervisor. That may be the breaking point for his professional experience as an individual contributor. He may not want to consider. He may just list that he was a product engineer as opposed to be a product manager.
Wonderful. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
I think David was in the part of asking a question when I recognized Brandon.
Yes. Have you ever heard of?
Mike will get to you in just a second. David.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of somebody having obviously a master resume that they cut and paste from, where they customize top third of the first page to meet job requirements and qualifications, but leave remainder 75%? Have you ever heard of something like that?
Our moderator is very, very much in favor of it. He says create a master resume, maybe 12 pages long, and then you can edit it down to 2 or 3 pages. I'm much more focused on maybe just tailoring it with the headline of the job and 2 or 3 bulleted accomplishments underneath your summary. Because those accomplishments, those are going to be the things that are coming right from the job posting. They may be the knockout factors that a recruiter has. Remember I mentioned my Siebel experience? If somebody didn't mention Siebel, they got eliminated, even though statistically, I'm sure that there was 1 or 2 candidates that could do the job that I was looking for, that had software implementation experience. Does that help, David? David, you're muted, so I'll presume.
Yes, yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Mike Franks, you've got a hand up, a question.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your input today. Is there ever a time that you would use a reference letter? Now, I've recruited a lot in plants and operations over the years, and I've never seen them at that level. But I got a particular nice one from my last manager, and it kind of highlights what I've done over the last few years. But is there ever a time that you would present that, or when would you
You
present that?
could, if you'll take a look at my LinkedIn profile and go down to my Oracle experience, you'll notice one of the things that I've included there, which is a little bit unusual. I've included the final email from the director of recruiting at Oracle Corporation. She sent a nice email when I retired. And I've included that paragraph along with her name and her title at the time in my profile. So I don't know that it's appropriate necessarily in the resume, but you can do it in the profile. And again, recruiters will take a look at your profile, just like they take a look at your resume. They try and get them in sync with one another. So if you've got those kind of things, yes, that's the place to include it. I don't know that including it in your resume, because resumes, I know when I was back in the early 70s, I used to get resume books from Boeing. And that's when they went from 100,000 employees down to 39,000. Yes, resume books that were 2 and 3 inches thick every week. Well, my wife used to say if somebody got a commercial while I was looking at their resume, they really got considered, because you could thumb through them. Recruiter just thumb through them that fast.
Right.
I mean, the other thing about, references, if you're connected with that person on LinkedIn, if you can get that person to write that message as a recommendation,
Yes.
that'll be something that'll be there permanently that people can, if they just happen to look at your LinkedIn profile, it'll be, oh, your past manager referred you. So
And that's the reason that's the reason, Jeff, that you want to include your LinkedIn URL. If I'm looking at your resume online and I see your LinkedIn URL, I could hold my cursor over that and click that. It automatically takes me to your profile on LinkedIn. So do include your LinkedIn profile URL. I mean, your LinkedIn URL in your resume. Another tip.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you very much, Locke. Good information.
Any other questions? I will say, let me sort of mention, when we talk about resumes, Locke had a thing, if you ask 100 people their recommendations, you're going to have 100 different people with suggestions. I've always said a great fundraiser for Career DFW and Career USA would be to get all the resume experts together, put them in an MMA ring, and it would be a knockdown drag out until they came out with the perfect resume, because everybody has their preference of what they like, and what person A likes and what person B likes and person C likes is always going to be different. So you just have to make sure that you're as covering as many things as possible and that you're comfortable with your resume. And if you're not getting any action, if you're not getting any results from your resume, then you maybe need to change it up.
The other thing about that, Jeff, that you just mentioned, which I think is important, you may encounter a recruiter who's asking you to change the format for their resume. The company they're with, if it's a recruiting firm, may have formats that they submit all their candidates in the same format to their clients. That's so that the company, when they receive those resumes, know that they're from that recruiting firm. Again, that's something that you may encounter as well.
Something I put in the chat window for everybody, for those who are watching on Zoom, I put in action words, sample resumes, a couple sample bios, one-page bios, and 2 different sample T cover letters. So those are there if you can download. If you can't download them, I'll have an email address shortly that you can send me an email. And for those watching on Facebook, I'll pop up an email here in just a second. And you can send me an email and I'll be sure to get those documents to you. Any other questions?
Brandon seems to have another question.
Oh, go ahead, Brandon.
Yes, I do. What are your thoughts on converting your resume to a PDF format versus like a Word document?
Good question. The most prevalent one is PDF, is a Word document. It's again, some of those 100 applicant tracking softwares do not recognize a PDF file. So the way that you've written it, because a PDF file locks into concrete how you presented it. Okay. Increasingly, they're accepted like that. So I, again, like one that's a little bit more flexible. I know it's a little bit easier to read from that standpoint. And most, as I say, you're going to have more acceptance by all applicant tracking systems if it's in a Word format. If you ever have any questions about when you created your resume and create a save or save as, you can save it as a text file. again, what you created it with the formatting that you're looking for. But saving it as a PDF file is going to save all that formatting that you've done.
I think the rule of thumb should be is if you're going to apply online through an ATS system, submit a Word document. If you're going to apply, if you're sending a resume to a recruiter directly, if you have somebody's direct email, a hiring manager, whatever, you send that PDF file. Because as Locke mentioned, a lot of the ATS systems, when they regurgitate the information that they upload, it looks really, really bad. So if you have that opportunity to send a decent looking resume, you want to send it as a PDF file. Let's see, there's another, Chris put a question here in the chat. How far back do you recommend going on experience?
Well, I think I'd go back and I omitted my experience prior to 76 because there was a 12-year block when I had my own recruiting firm. Then I went to E-Systems and Raytheon Systems, which was 10 years or 9 years. And then I was with Siebel and Oracle, which is another 12-year block of time. So again, it depends. But again, if there's something meaningful that you want to include from earlier experience, just list the company or organization name and location, and then what were you doing? What was the job title? And if there was any accomplishment that you had, you probably want to include that as well.
Yeah, because I have a big experience back in 2001 was when I worked there, and I got a regional award. But it's a totally different thing. Although I'd like to get back into that, more sales, and now I'm kind of operations. So I just wondered if it dates me and makes me seem as old as I am, and if that's going to hurt me. But
well, the key here is you have a section. So after you've listed the last 10 to 15 years of your experience with some details, you have a section called prior relevant experience. You don't list any dates. You list company, job title, and maybe one bullet point that was the success story there. And what that allows you to do is talk about any experience you have during a phone or a in-person interview. I've heard of, recruiters have said, yeah, somebody will come in and they'll talk about a time that they worked at a company and that company's not listed anywhere on their resume. And they go, wait a second, when was that? Oh, well, that was before, I didn't list it on there. But by listing prior relevant experience, that will give you the permission to be able to list those, to talk about and list that information.
Right.
And you'll see that on our sample resume that's in the chat window.
Right.
thank you.
If anybody really is interested, again, in the slide deck, it's lockealderson@gmail.com. I'll be happy to send it to you.
Yeah, here's Locke's information. I'll pop it up here. If you want to connect with Locke, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Just send him a personal note. Let him know that you saw him here today. And there's Locke's email address, lockealderson@gmail.com. Just tell him what you're looking for, and he will get that to you. But if you want to connect with Locke, be sure to send that personal note.
Yes, please. Always
Thank you
send
very
the
much.
personal note.
Huh?
Always send the personal note if you're going to connect with somebody.
Right. And just remember, your resume and your LinkedIn profile will not get you a job. What will get you a job, what it does get you is a phone call. So if you don't practice your interview skills, that could be what gets you or doesn't get you a job, how much you interview. So just be aware of that.
And sign up on Wednesdays. They have practice interviews, and you can see even if you just observe, you can get some tips and pointers about how interviews are conducted. Jeff has been on the panel. I was on the panel. I hesitate to say it's been 8 years ago, but I got real busy when I was with Mullen and Associates. So I dropped off the panel. So
Right. So if you want more information about interviewing, just go to dallaspitcrew.com, dallaspitcrew.com. Okay, if you want to get a sample resume, the one-page bio, the sample T cover letter is any of the things that I put in the chat window you can't get hold of, just send me an email to resume@careerdfw.org, resume@careerdfw.org, and I will get that to you. Just let me know what you're looking for, and I will be sure to get those documents to you. Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please join us tomorrow morning at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group meeting, 9:30 in the morning. PJ Dunn will be with us to talk about stress less, live more while on the job search track. We will be meeting via Zoom and Facebook only. We will not be in person because of Vacation Bible School. So tomorrow we'll be on Zoom and Facebook only. Next Tuesday, how to drive recruiters to your LinkedIn profile with Ruth Lipsky. Ruth worked with Locke when they were both at Lee Heck Harrison. I think Ruth is still with them.
Yep.
Great presentation next Tuesday about how to drive recruiters to your LinkedIn profile. Next Wednesday, as we mentioned before, practice interview team. You can schedule a practice interview. You can watch an actual practice interview. You can be interviewed. It's only via Zoom. There's no recording available after the event, and it's not on Facebook. If you'd like to have your own interview, just go to dallaspitcrew.com and you'll get all the information you need there.
And I will say about the interviewing, don't try and submit your resume and the job posting the night before you interview, because again, there's some lead time so that the interviewers can actually create the interview questions that they're going to ask you.
Right. We usually need a couple days to be able to do that. So yeah. All right. And then next Thursday, networking. Every session we have a different speaker to share their thoughts on networking. I think our speaker next week is Jason Hopper from Jewish Family Services, and he'll be talking about just other places you could network at. So please join us next Thursday at 1 o'clock. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, click on playlist. Every video that I upload goes into a different one of the 7 playlists that are on there. When you click on where that green arrow is playlist, then select the list you want: resumes, interviewing, networking, LinkedIn. And instead of clicking on the video there, click down below which says view full playlist, and up will come a list of all the dates, topics, and titles, and you can go down and scroll and see whichever one you'd like to go back and watch. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops and you'd like to join the Career USA mailing list, just send an email to Career USA, the +subscribe at groups.io. You will not be spammed, but what you will get is the Zoom link of the day, the title, and the topic of the day. And the most important thing is you have the Zoom link, so you don't have to go search for it. It'll be right there in your emails. Grab your lunch, grab your breakfast, and join us for one of our sessions. Please note, Career DFW is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. I want to thank Locke for speaking today. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 13 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So please consider making a donation when you get your next job. We'd really appreciate it so we can continue to provide the services that we provide. So thank you very much for joining us today. Locke, once again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me.
Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow or one day next week.